Something has changed about cannabis, and most people haven't noticed. Many adults still think of weed the way it was decades ago, mild, natural, and mostly harmless. But the cannabis being sold today is not the same plant your parents or grandparents may have known. It's stronger, much stronger. And scientists are now warning that this new, high-potency weed may be affecting young brains in ways we are only beginning to understand.
Tonight, we're talking about what modern cannabis can really do to the developing brain, why teenagers and young adults are at higher risk, and how one decision made at a young age can sometimes change a life forever. This is not about judging anyone. This is about understanding the science and protecting mental health. Because when it comes to the brain, what you don't know can hurt you. Let's start with something very important. The human brain is not fully grown until around age 25. Even though a teenager may look grown up on the outside, the brain inside is still under construction. The areas that control decision-making, emotions, memory, and reality are still developing. Think of a young brain like a house being built. The walls are going up, the wires are being connected, and the system is still fragile. Now imagine pouring a very strong chemical into that system while it's still being wired. That's what high-potency cannabis may be doing. The main chemical in cannabis that causes the high is called THC. Years ago, most cannabis had very low levels of THC, often just 2 to 4%. Today, many products contain 15, 20, even 30% THC, and that's just regular marijuana. Concentrates like oils, wax, and dabs can reach 60 to 90% THC. That's not a small change. That's like comparing a small cup of coffee to drinking several energy drinks at once. The brain simply isn't prepared for that level of stimulation, especially a young brain. So what happens inside the brain? When someone uses strong cannabis, THC affects a system in the brain called the endocannabinoid system. This system helps control mood, memory, learning, sleep, and how we respond to stress. In adults, this system is already built, but in teenagers, it's still being shaped. When large amounts of THC enter the brain during this time, it can disrupt how brain cells connect with each other. It can interfere with how memories are formed. It can change how emotions are processed. Some of these effects can fade after the drug wears off, but in some young people, the changes don't fully go away. One of the biggest concerns doctors now have is the link between high-potency cannabis and psychosis. Psychosis is when a person begins to lose touch with reality. They may hear voices that aren't there. They may believe things that are not true. They may feel extreme paranoia, like everyone is watching them or trying to harm them. For some people, these symptoms happen only while they are high. But for others, especially young users of strong cannabis, the symptoms can last much longer and sometimes become the start of serious mental illnesses, like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. This is not rare anymore. Hospitals in many countries are reporting more young people coming in with cannabis-related psychosis, especially after using high-THC products. And here's what makes this even more serious. Once someone has had a psychotic episode, their risk of having another one in the future goes up. For some, that first episode becomes the beginning of a lifelong mental health struggle. You might be wondering, does this happen to everyone who uses weed? No, not everyone, but the risk is not random either. Some people are more vulnerable than others, and many don't know they are at risk until it's too late. If someone has a family history of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or severe depression, their brain may already be more sensitive. Adding strong THC into the mix can act like a trigger, even without a family history. Teenagers are still more at risk simply because their brains are still developing. The younger someone starts using high-potency cannabis, the higher the risk appears to be. Starting at 14 or 15 is not the same as starting at 25. The brain at 14 is still wiring up systems that control thinking, emotions, and reality itself. Another effect scientists are studying is memory and learning. Have you ever heard someone joke that weed makes you forget things? For young users, this can be more than just a joke. THC affects the hippocampus, the part of the brain that helps form new memories. In teenagers who use strong cannabis often, studies show problems with attention, learning, and remembering information. This can show up as falling grades, trouble concentrating, or feeling mentally slower. Some teens think school just got harder, but in some cases, the brain is struggling to process information the way it used to. And the scary part is, heavy use during teenage years has been linked in some studies to long-term changes in thinking skills, even after stopping. The brain is powerful and can heal in many ways, but repeated exposure to very strong THC during development may leave lasting marks. There's also the emotional side. Teenagers already deal with strong emotions. Mood swings, stress, social pressure, it's part of growing up. Cannabis is often used to relax or escape stress. But in some young people, strong THC can actually make anxiety and depression worse. Instead of calming the brain, it can overstimulate it. Some teens report feeling more paranoid, more nervous, in social situations, or more emotionally unstable after regular use. And when they try to stop, they may feel irritable, restless, or down, which makes them want to use again. This cycle can quietly lead to dependence, where the brain starts to feel like it needs cannabis just to feel normal. Modern cannabis is also more powerful than ever in another way: how fast it hits the brain. Vaping and concentrates deliver THC very quickly and in high amounts. The brain gets flooded before it has time to adjust. This sudden, intense effect increases the chance of panic attacks, extreme paranoia, and psychotic symptoms, especially in first-time or young users. Some teens think vaping weed is safer because there's no smoke, but when it comes to the brain, the risk is about THC strength, not smoke. A high-potency vape can affect the brain just as strongly, sometimes even more strongly than smoking. One of the most heartbreaking parts of this issue is how suddenly things can change. A teenager can be doing fine in school, hanging out with friends, planning for the future. And then, after using strong cannabis, they experience a severe mental break. They may start acting differently, talking in strange ways, believing things that don't make sense, pulling away from family and friends. Parents may feel confused and scared, not knowing what happened. Sometimes it takes months or years before everyone realizes that cannabis may have played a role in triggering a serious mental illness. And by then, the person's life path may already be very different. But it's important to say again, this does not happen to everyone, but the risk is real. And the risk is higher today than it was in the past, simply because the products are stronger. Many teens are making decisions based on old information, believing weed is mild and harmless, without realizing that today's cannabis is a different substance in terms of strength. If young people knew that strong THC could increase the risk of losing touch with reality, could affect memory and learning, and could worsen anxiety and depression, many would think twice. Knowledge doesn't take away freedom. It helps people make safer choices. So what can young people do to protect their brains? The safest choice for mental health is to avoid cannabis use during the teenage years and early 20s, when the brain is still developing. If someone chooses to use later in life, avoiding high-potency products is very important. The stronger the THC, the greater the stress on the brain, but it's also important to pay attention to. Warning signs: if cannabis use ever leads to intense paranoia, hearing or seeing things that aren't there, or feeling completely disconnected from reality, that is a serious signal. It means the brain may not handle THC well. Ignoring those signs and continuing to use can increase the chance of long-term problems, and no one should feel pressured to use just to fit in. Real friends don't require you to risk your mental health. Parents and adults also have a role. Open.com conversations work better than fear or anger. Teens are more likely to listen when they feel respected and informed, not judged. Sharing real science in simple terms can help young people understand. But this isn't about rules, it's about protecting the most important organ in their body. The brain controls thoughts, dreams, personality, and the ability to enjoy life. Taking care of it during its most sensitive years is one of the smartest investments anyone can make. We are living in a time where cannabis is more available and more accepted than ever before. But stronger does not mean safer. Modern high-potency weed is a powerful drug that can affect the developing brain in serious ways. For some young people, the effects can last far beyond the high. This isn't about fear, it's about awareness. Your brain is still growing, still building, still becoming the person you are meant to be. Protecting it now can shape the rest of your life. Because when it comes to mental health, the choices made in youth can echo for decades, and your mind is worth protecting.